Good morning, good afternoon. Don't say good night yet. We got a project here. We got a developer slash founder, perhaps. We'll get to know more about him here in a minute. But we got Stoic from the Post group, who is working on Wait and perhaps other things as well. This should be an interesting show. You know, I've been looking at Wait a little bit. It's just one of those projects. You know, there's a ton of different community projects, and I'm like, you know, what is, you know, I kind of get like waiting for, kind of get the game theory around like the waiting thing, but I wasn't sure what what kind of utility it had and what kind of other interesting features may be in it. But hey, they have an actual white paper. They have a claim phase going on now. I think they even have a market price or something on Uniswap I might have came across. So we're going to learn more about it because we got some people in here that know stuff, and talk about free claim, talk about HEX, PulseChain, all that stuff too. So yeah, very interesting one today, I think. So without further ado, let's bring him in. Let's bring in Stoic. Welcome to the show.
Hey Max, thanks for having me, man. Really appreciate it. I'm very excited to go through some of this stuff with you.
Definitely. Yeah, we've been talking for the last, I think, week or two, just kind of on, I've been trying to set up the prep a little bit and be like, okay, what can we, I know talk about the Wait token, but like what else can we get as far as like, I know you got experience in a lot of different directions, and it seems like there's an actual organization going on, and which is kind of unnatural for a lot of crypto projects, at least one that runs functionally in any sort of way. So that's what I was excited to talk to you about. And just talking to a few minutes before the stream too. I think people are going to be they're going to get some good information. I think we got a lot of cool stuff to talk about. So before we jump into Wait and Coast and how that came together, like, you want to just give us a story of like how'd you get into crypto? How'd you find Richard Hart stuff? What is Coast? How did that come together and all that good stuff?
Sure. Yeah. So I'm one of 6 guys, all guys who work at Coast. I'm probably the product lead, I guess you would say. Had most of the ideas, I would suggest, although that's starting to change now as people get a bit more experiences, which is very exciting. New features that I'm not coming up with myself is really great. My sort of intro to Richard Hart with crypto was in 2017. Actually, I was watching him talk through, I think it was in July of 17, where China banned Bitcoin for a while. Mm-hmm. And he was one of the few people saying, hey, this is actually going to be good for price. Watch it go 20K by Christmas. And then there was the Roger Ver interview a couple months later. And,
it's a great one.
It's classic. Everybody who hasn't seen it really needs to, because that's where you start to see the difference between a person who has a real grasp of the industry and a person who's trying to release a project that, maybe is trying to steal some mind share from an existing brand or something, right? So, so I started with Richard back then, and my actual crypto stuff goes back earlier than that, though. I was mining on a little Toshiba laptop in 2015 and trying to run, doing some stuff on local Bitcoins and whatnot. And so, I go back a ways.
Yeah, so it's interesting that you've been watching him, at least Richard, for quite a while. I think, I've said before, I've been following him since around 2017, and definitely one of the first Roger Ver. There's 2 Roger Ver interviews. The first one, of course, was in 2017. The other one was maybe 2020, 2021. But that first one, that really, I think, set Richard up to get a big following, because once you can go into with a titan like that in the industry, and then look really good, during the interview, and definitely, like you said, separate yourself, from the pack as far as knowing how these things work, knowing how crypto and the industry and things are going. That was definitely a huge. I don't know, what's the opposite of a red flag? A huge, good sign to me when I was early days when I was following
Probably
him.
A bull flag.
This guy's, a huge bull flag for Richard Hart and his stock. So
I really enjoyed the fact that he came out quickly and was like, hey, you need to treat Bitcoin forks like a dividend for a stock. You're holding this thing that's paying you a dividend. You need to take your Bitcoin Cash, or Bcash, which was a better brand I think he recommended at one point. You need to take your Bcash. Here's how you sell it. And here's how you just buy more Bitcoin with it. And, that really appealed to me. And I took the same approach to the rest of the forks that happened, right? Okay, hang on. Now I need to approach Bitcoin, if people are going to do it this way, like a dividend. And here I've got this yield on top of my appreciation. Well, now it's time to cash it in and go get some more BTC.
Those were the days when we had Bitcoin forks and just like things that, a lot of them were actually worth money too, for a while at least. So yeah, that's if y'all people watching, if you haven't seen a lot of Richard's old videos, it is worth going through at least his top ones. The net neutrality guy. If you got 20-25 minutes, watch the net neutrality guy video. It's pretty hilarious. The guy rage quits, and he's actually, I think, is that Bruce Fenton? I think he's actually like a legit guy too. But apparently had a breakdown. But it's funny and interesting to listen to them go back and forth about different topics.
Yeah,
there's a ton of good ones.
The poor kid that he ripped apart, who did the Zcash clone, that was pretty rough.
What's his name?
He took it surprisingly well on stream. That poor
Brett,
guy.
Brett something. Yeah, that guy. That was funny enough. I remember Richard he used to talk a lot about what other coins. This is before HEX and everything. Like what other coins would he recommend? And what was the one that was actually really cool? I think he did actually get some of that, whatever that guy, the Rhett. His name was Rhett. That's what it was. Rhett something.
Rhett, yeah. No. Rhett was doing a Zcash, or no, he was doing Z Classic, I think. And then
was it Z Classic?
The other one,
yeah,
it was Z Classic. And then the other one that Richard did that he was trying to promote was Byteball for a while.
Byteball, yeah. Actually, I remember having the Byteball client and getting those black bytes, and then they apparently at one time the black bytes weren't portable or something, and I remember losing a bunch of black bytes, and it was. But I love the whole. I forget what even the system they used. It was it not DAO but DAG. They used a DAG, so a different kind of blockchain system.
Yep.
And but it was actually fun to use. They had like games on it. They had the client was pretty legit. I don't know what happened to it now.
He was just one guy, the developer, the guy who did Byteball. He was one dude operating on his own, and I just don't think he had the capacity anymore.
It's rough, when you make something that crazy, and then it is one person. And I remember him saying, Byteball, as long as you're okay trusting like one Russian guy.
Yep.
That's what he said so many times.
Well, and it's also like once you get a product out there, you don't realize that you're not a developer anymore. Now you're customer service, and now you're tech support, and now you're all of these other
marketing.
Yeah. Exactly. You're all of these other things that you have to consider, and your language is important. How you interact with people is important. You've got to constantly be removing scammers who are trying to manipulate your users, and all the things that we're going through right now, but on a much smaller scale than someone like Richard. So you don't realize as a one-person team that as soon as you release a product, you think that's this checkpoint, right? This moment in time where it's out there, and hey, now I'm really happy, I'm done. It's like no. Now it just
works,
man.
Yeah, I think what killed Byteball was I remember Richard complaining about the free claim for Bitcoin ending. He just said, nope, we're going to stop doing it. And I think that alienated a lot of the Bitcoin people who were into it. Besides that, it's a pretty cool project. I gotta say, don't know what's happening now. I haven't caught up with it for a while, but I imagine price down lower than it used to be. If I were to guess,
I haven't heard anything about it in a long time. I'm not even sure if it's still supported.
Give me back my black bytes. I had so many black bytes. Give them back.
Yep.
All right, man. Let's get into weight. What just, for people who may not know much about it or just kind of want to get a refresher, what is weight? What are the motivations for the project? What makes it valuable? Is it part of something bigger? What is weight?
Yeah, sure. The motivation for it came over the course of maybe 2 months. We were building products. We had assembled a team. We were teaching some new guys. We're, upskilling people. And during that time, we were also managing some private groups that we had used to invest as pools in Pulse and PulseX. Similar groups of people, but not exactly the same. And I, as sort of one of the organizers, I was having people come to me from the groups pretty routinely being like, hey, I over leveraged myself for this thing. I know you said I couldn't have any expectations. And I know you said that, You know, you expected it to be sooner than it was, and I'm not blaming you. They were very clear to say that, but you know, we're in this situation now where we needed cash flow, or we needed to get an exit from this a little bit sooner than we're able to. Hey, can you help us? And so, you know, a couple of us have personally bailed out people from our own group, or, you know, given them the opportunity to sell portions of their, you know, stake in the group to one another. And we just realized that there's people, you know, within our 60 person group, if that's happening with multiple people, well, you can do the numbers and realize quickly that, hey, if there's, you know, a couple 100,000 people who have sacrificed for these different things, and it's not just Pulse and PulseX, but if there's that number of people, let's call it, you know, 250,000 people, well, there's probably 50,000 people who are over leveraged and who did make a mistake with their capital allocation and who don't have the cash flow to fall back on. And maybe they weren't early HEX people. And so they're probably struggling a bit. And so, you know, we looked at it, we said, hey, we can put these other things on hold because, yeah, it'd be great to have them out sooner. But, you know, people are hurting a little bit right now. We feel like there's something we can do. Yeah, maybe we can add future value to it in some way. Maybe it'll create a set of people to whom a future product can be given. But in the very short term, we feel like we can make something that gamifies the launch, makes it interesting for people, keeps them engaged, because people in the same groups, right, we're just dropping off. They wouldn't respond to polls. They wouldn't join the voice chats. You know, they're just off a cliff, you know, doing their own thing. So it was a way to bring people back in as well and re-engage them so that they thought about, you know, when the product was going to launch. And so we figured out a way to do that, a way to gamify it, make it a little bit interesting. You know, as we've sort of talked about, Wait's a pretty limited feature set in terms of a smart contract that, you know, it's 250 lines of code or whatever, right? It's not meant to be HEX. It's not meant to replace one of those big, bold tools. But it is designed to galvanize the community. It is designed to bring people together. And it is designed such that if you have different use cases, it hopefully fulfills them. You know, we had someone on Twitter tell us that she bought a plane ticket to go see her parents. And we had another guy with her free weight claim, and we had another guy who said he bought a box of beer. And then we've got other people who are saying, I'm going to wait till the very, very last minute so I can get the maximum midnight bonus possible. And so, you know, it's one of those things that if you've been around in the HEX community for long enough, you realize that these tools, while they're created with one intention in mind, very often they fulfill different needs for different people. And so that's what we're finding with it. And I think that's really exciting.
Yeah, just the like I said, my initial impression was like, is this? Yeah, I'm glad it is part of something bigger, but I didn't quite know the story too, and how, you know, making it. It's interesting how you can make a set of, you know, like-minded people from just, you know, kind of deriving these things from the sacrifice sets and all that stuff. That is something that, yeah, I think it's at a lower level type of thinking that. You know, maybe kind of unintuitive at first, but when you really get into it and then you say, you know, look at what Hedron's doing and the ecosystem there of all these different tokens that have that positive feedback loop and how it rewards, you know, people that they make a list of, you know, HEX holders and stakers and things like that. So I think it makes a lot more sense, especially when you go through it like that. Let's see, got a couple. Yeah. So I did want to go through the contract too.
Sure.
Is it on GitHub, Etherscan? Where's like the best place to kind of go through it?
Yeah, you can find it on Etherscan. If you search Wait on Etherscan, you should grab it pretty quickly. Or if you type contract or !contract in our Telegram chat, you'll find the link.
Okay. Because I think I found on Etherscan. Does it have like a logo or nothing on there right now?
It doesn't have a logo yet.
Okay.
It will very soon. We're just working on a couple of other things.
The
contract ends in 519F7.
All right, I got the right one then.
Beauty.
Let's see, where are we at? Okay. Yeah. So
just for clarity, you're technically actually on the token page right now, as opposed to the contract page.
Yeah, that's what I was wanted to get to. Can I click on something here to get on the contract page?
Just below profile summary under contract, you can click that link on that number.
Oh, it's just there. Okay. Okay. I thought there was like another deal. Okay. Now we got contract. Gotcha.
Exactly. Yep.
So, yeah, do you want to just kind of walk through it? I think it'd be kind of educational too, just to tell everyone like how does a Solidity contract work? Like, what do these things do? Do you want to go through
Sure.
like a few
Actually,
lines at a time?
the second line is interesting in Solidity. One of the things that came back in our audit was that we had used a floating modifier at the start of our Solidity version. And as a result, our auditors at SolidProof came back and said, hey, you really should make this static. So we actually had an error on this, or not an error. It's not a security flaw or anything, but people like to use this solid one. So we had a different modifier on that, and that was the only thing that really came back in our security audit when we deployed on testnet, that our auditors came back and said, hey, you might want to change this.
Are you talking about the Pragma line?
Yeah, line 2. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, definitely nothing to do with security. Just like a kind of what you said. They came back and said you might want to change it because you made version on the wrong thing.
The way you see it there is the changed version. The previous version had a floating modifier before it, so it basically just meant that the contract should read anything that is an upgraded version of Solidity above 8.0. Or that it was indicating that the contract would be compatible with something above 8.0, and it's not. It's static with this version.
Gotcha. Okay.
And so, like, I should clarify, I am not actually one of the developers. I'm work a little bit on the game theory and the product design. So I'm probably not the best person to describe every line of code here, but I can give you the general.
Yeah, not every line. Just I mean, we'll go through some of the functions. I know this is up in Zeppelin. I did a blog post recently about how to create your own ERC20 with an Open Zeppelin. Super easy to do. You can do it in Remix, IDE, all that stuff. Exactly. If anyone's interested, go at rhmax.org/blog and look up the how to make your own ERC21 if anybody wants to check that out. But yeah, contract weight. So clear this burnable. Okay.
So
using
these
Chainlink for Chainlink request.
Yeah, so we had to use Chainlink, a Chainlink Oracle in the contract. It's not optimal. And look, if you had a smaller data set to use, you could use a Merkle tree to store all of this data. But the problem with doing that is that you're stuck with the data set that you have as soon as you deploy. And if you know in advance that your data set should be changed because you, for example, want to add additional sacrifices to the set of eligible addresses, you really need to make the database editable. And if you deploy using a Merkle tree, you really can't. So that's why we decided to go with the Chainlink version. None of this is optimal when you're talking about large data sets and off-chain data interfacing with on-chain data. But this is the best we have as an industry right now, unfortunately. So that's the reason for the use of the Chainlink Oracle.
Okay, so it's in a timekeeper total sacks. Okay, so it's using Chainlink to make it editable later on. Okay, because you don't know when the things are actually going to launch. That's the point.
I should clarify that a little bit. So there's two sort of things in the contract that make it not immutable. And the first is the ability of the team here to end minting at any time. The reason, as you correctly identified there, Max, is because if we knew when PulseChain was going to launch, we could do this hard coding into the contract, but then, obviously we wouldn't have the game theory or anything behind it. So the reason for that is because we have to be able to run the end minting function after PulseChain launches. There have been a couple of theories proposed for how to do this in a trustless way. And we have investigated those with some help from some developers who are in the PulseChain dev chat. Unfortunately, we could do them, but the advice we've been given is that if anything were to go wrong, if like Richard were to change the chain ID or a URL or something like this, it would probably still break things. So you would, even if you did it that way, basically what you would do is you would have a repeated call such that you would try and check for the first block on PulseChain. And then if you wrote that into the contract, then you would know that PulseChain hasn't launched yet. And therefore you wouldn't have to run this manager function after it launched, because the contract could check, know that it's launched because the first block's been mined, and then it could run the function on its own. The advice we got was that, look, if something went wrong, it wouldn't work. So you should probably put a manager function in there anyway. And I mean, if you have to write a backup manager function, then you might as well just have a manager function. So that was kind of the theory behind that.
Okay, gotcha. And these are just different mappings for different variables.
Those are all the mappings for the different functions that you can see. So if you go over to the write contract or the read contract area, that's where you'll see that data.
Functions. Okay.
Yep, exactly.
Yeah. So if you go, we'll just click on read. Yeah. So these are different functions. Okay. Gotcha.
Yep.
Cool.
So this is where, in the code there that's where you would define the read functions.
Gotcha. The structure. Okay. So manager and what does this address go to?
That is the address of the entity that can end minting and distribute bonuses. So one of the pieces of the game theory in the wait contract is that in a similar way to the way HEX was launched, I don't know if you remember that, but I assume you do.
Mm-hmm.
You had this 350-day period where the adoption amplifier was running, and for all of the for all of the Bitcoin holders who decided not to claim their free HEX, 97% of them, largely because they were on centralized exchange wallets and things like this, those HEX were never claimed. And as a result, all of the HEX that was available to be minted by Bitcoin holders was distributed to HEX stakers, in this case, not claimers, but stakers, via an event known as Big Payday. I believe it was November 19th, 2020 from memory. Anyway, so we, being longtime HEX people, we kind of built in the exact same mechanism to the wait contract. So anyone who claims their wait is actually given shares in the midnight bonus. And anyone who decides not to claim wait, you're actually still a network participant in a sense. You're performing an action by performing no action, because your potential wait that you could have claimed will be distributed to the people who did decide to claim.
Gotcha.
And so that address under the manager on line 34 there, that is the address that is able to end minting. And in the process, it will allocate the remaining wait that could have been minted to the shareholders that have minted previously. It does not actually distribute the wait to them, because that would require sending an ERC20 to people. And sending an ERC20, even though it might seem like it's quite cheap, if we were to try and do this, it would cost somewhere in the region of about $700K. And now it would be probably over $1 million to actually distribute it. So people who participate and who come back to the Ethereum chain to claim their midnight bonus do actually have to run a function to mint their midnight bonus. They don't have to check eligibility. They don't have to fund the Chainlink node, but they still do have to mint from the contract.
So those two functions that the manager does, is there a way for us to verify that's the only two things it can do?
It's defined in there, the only thing it can do. So it's actually one function. It just performs two things.
Okay, so we'll get to it in the review.
Yep.
Okay, perfect. Total people, pretty self-explanatory. How many people were able to claim from the different sacrifices, right?
Correct. Yep.
Sack times. This is the computer way of saying dates and times. So it looks confusing. Yeah.
So you'll notice there that the sack times and the total people start at 0, which is a pretty common convention in writing code. And then, as you described, that's a computer reference version of a date. Each of those is actually the end date for the sacrifice. And we haven't talked about this, but we actually, if you check that date for Pulse, we actually gave people a little bit of a grace period after the end of the Pulse sacrifice, because we felt that there would be a few people that would. Yeah, we're trying to be inclusive, right? Like, so we tried to put as many people as we could in. We cut it off after a grace period of a month because we felt like that was enough.
There's still people donating. Like, I bet today you look at it, there's people putting some kind of shitcoins in there, I bet.
Exactly. And you had to cut it off at some point, and so we did. And it's not quite the same grace period for all the other projects, but there is a grace period in there.
Gotcha. Set Chainlink token, set Chainlink Oracle. So these are referencing Chainlink tokens and Oracle contracts.
Yeah, exactly. Yep.
Okay.
So when a user performs the first function in the contract, the check eligibility function, it actually goes to the Chainlink node, to the Oracle, the address ending in 549 there, and it goes and gets the eligibility status using that job ID just below it. So the job ID and the Oracle is sent to the Oracle contract with the person's Ethereum address under that specific job. And then a message is returned. That message is a string of numbers that denotes their eligibility in the different claims. So all that is returned is either no number or a specific number that establishes that they're eligible in one of or all of those different 8 projects.
Gotcha. Okay, cool. Manager function.
You can actually see that math defined a little bit further down. It's a little interesting the way we just decided to do it.
Okay. Maintain with turn off. Cool.
Yeah. So those are the modifiers that you were talking about with the manager contracts just there. Yeah. You
still there?
Yep, I'm still here.
Okay.
So you've got that's your check database information there when you're running that Chainlink function and returning the address and returning the eligibility.
Bro man.
Yep.
Okay. Just for people watching, why is it bro? Why is it man?
I can't remember. I'll ask one of the devs.
Just for fun. It's got to be something. Okay.
Yeah, they enjoy themselves.
Yeah. Fulfill. Let's see. Record Chainlink fulfillment. Okay. More Chainlink stuff.
So that's your Chainlink stuff, and this is where you have your eligibility defined by those different numbers. So I can't remember exactly which one is which. I'm sorry, but I think the yes and then equal to or less than or equal to a specific digit that establishes your eligibility.
Gotcha. Okay.
So that's what's actually returned from Chainlink to the contract and then stored in the contract. So then at that point, your eligibility is stored in the contract, and that's why it's different. That's why it has to be multiple functions performed and multiple gas fees paid, because the contract doesn't actually know who you are until you store your eligibility and your Ethereum address in the contract. And that's something you have to do by checking the Chainlink node. And then when it returns the eligibility, it saves you in the contract so that the next time you come back, it knows how much weight you're entitled to based on the math with respect to the previous times, and then eligibility. That gives you an amount of weight that you're allowed to mint.
Gotcha. Minimal weight. So basically just checking how much you're able to mint based on the person asking.
Yep.
Mint weight. Okay. Checks to see if you've already minted or not. Okay. Sec time. Yeah. And the mint function for the sender. Okay. Mintable all weight. So it's doing the loop to see. Is this coming up with a total that can be minted, or what?
That's if you that gives you or returns you a figure that tells you how much you would be able to mint if you minted all of your weight for all of the projects at the same time.
Gotcha.
So we built it out, and we referenced this in the white paper. We sort of said, I mean, everyone's familiar with the concept of dollar cost averaging. And while we don't think a lot of people have used this, I think it's something like 15% of people have chosen not to hit mint or weight at the same time. And what they're doing instead is what we've termed weight claim averaging, where you claim one early, you lock in your shares from that. And then, hey, maybe some of the other ones you want to let, wait a little bit longer until you get closer to the Pulse the Pulse launch. And that way you get more shares in that specific project's midnight bonus.
Interesting. Yeah, we should talk about the strategies for claiming minting too once we get done with this. It's something I think a lot of people will be interested in. Has checked. Mint all weight. Okay, just more minting functions for people. Okay. Midnight bonus. Yep. So what is the midnight bonus and how does it work here?
Yeah, so it's our corollary for the big payday, where all of the unclaimed weight is distributed to all of the people who did claim based on their shares in the specific midnight bonus. So it's worth mentioning that we're calling it the midnight bonus. It's actually 8 midnight bonuses, one for each project. If you, for example, were in Fiat, this Fiat sacrifice, and you decide to claim, it doesn't entitle you to shares in the Pulse midnight bonus. They're project specific, but we're just referring to them as the one thing. And so the manager function that you can see on line 211 there runs the midnight bonus function, distributes the midnight bonus to all of the participants based on their shares, distributes 50% of the midnight bonus to this entity called the timekeeper, which is an Ethereum address to which you can have no expectations of profit from the work of others, similar to like an OA type entity.
Can you just, while we're on that, can you just talk about the timekeeper? What, no expectations of them, but like, what is their purpose?
It's to distribute some of the unclaimed weight to a centralized entity that could do something with it in the future and might not. And it's very similar to the OA address in the HEX contract, that in most circumstances, when one of these addresses exists, I can't talk about the timekeeper specifically, but in the case of most other projects that have a function like this, they tend to be benevolent actors who hold and never sell, or utilize their assets in some way that benefits the community.
And what percentage of weight does the timekeeper have?
So it'll depend on how many people claim their weight. If 50% of people claim the weight and the remaining 50% is split 50-50 between the people that claim and the people that don't claim, the timekeeper would wind up with about 25% of the circulating supply. That would be the case on both Ethereum and on PulseChain. And because of the way we've set weight up, there is no inflation after PulseChain launches. So it could potentially be a pretty powerful thing, establishing a set of people who, played the game right and guessed very close to the Pulse launch and minted their weight on both chains. And now there's no inflation in the token. Everybody talks about Bitcoin being not inflationary, forgetting that it is, obviously, but we will genuinely have something here with weight that does not have any inflation. So, any mechanism in the future that we're able to remove weight from supply might be able to have a very positive price impact on it.
Is there any other than the timekeeper? Is there any kind of like founder rewards or anything like that would be in the contract?
No, there's nothing like that.
Gotcha. Okay, mintable unclaimed weight. Still on. Cool. It's more of a simple boilerplate, like check this condition, that condition.
Yeah, something to keep in mind with weight is that there are multiple different claim phases. The first of which is obviously claiming because you're a sacrificer, but the minting of the midnight bonus, you could decide not to perform. Like this would be similar, or not running that function would be kind of like not taking possession of a HEX stake at the end of it and running good accounting instead. So, I doubt very much that there are a lot of people will use this. I tend to think that people who receive the midnight bonus will mint it right away. But in the event that they don't want to, it can just stay in the contract. There might be some sort of tax reason why they choose not to do that. So that would be okay too.
So claiming the midnight bonus, and we can get into this when we go through how to claim. But the midnight bonus is, did you say that was like the big payday type thing?
Yeah, exactly. So it'll be allocated to people, but it won't. So unlike the big payday where it was actually distributed to people to their stakes, in the case of the midnight bonus, it would be allocated to everybody who claimed based on their proportion of the shares in their specific project sacrifice. And then they would have to come back to the website or the dApp or the Etherscan and perform an additional function to mint the weight associated with the midnight bonus. And obviously, because the weight contract is going to be forked onto PulseChain, they could technically do this twice, once on Ethereum and then once on PulseChain as well.
And when can people claim the midnight bonus? Is there a certain time period?
Yeah, so there's been a lot of speculation as to when and under what circumstances Richard will actually announce PulseChain. And I know there was some speculation that we would turn off minting as soon as he announced it, right? To sort of end the game. But we're not going to do that. If he announces it and says, hey, you know, PulseChain's launching on Friday, that'll give people plenty of time to come in and mint their weight and lock in their shares and then hopefully receive the midnight bonus. It doesn't make any sense for us to manipulate the system in that way and prevent people from actually getting that bonus. So just wanted to be very clear, like PulseChain launching is the catalyst for us running the manager function that ends minting. The announcement of PulseChain is not, because obviously we have to run it on both chains anyway, right? So if he announces it and there's 2 days, well, that should give people plenty of time to get it.
Gotcha. Minting's still on. Okay. Yeah, that seems about the most interesting parts of it. It looks like.
Yeah, not a terribly long contract. You know, we put it together in sort of 3 weeks and tried to get it out as fast as we could, and yeah, so it's a limited feature set, but hopefully it establishes a group of people who are like-minded and interested in waiting, and those seem like good people to give things to.
Delayed gratification crew. Yes,
indeed. And you know, it's nice to be able to get yield on something that you got for free.
Definitely. Yeah. It's the whole free yield, incentivize, positive feedback loop, staking. Like it's they're all these, you know, games to get you to not sell, price go up, you know, be able to get passive income, wealth, things like that. So it's man, very interesting. What about, you want to go through how, so show me how to claim this on Etherscan?
Sure.
Is that through some of the functions we looked at before? Like, let's see,
read
contract by contract.
Yeah, so just keep in mind the difference between the token URL in Etherscan and the contract URL. Obviously, we're on the contract URL right now, but if you're looking at this as someone who's watching and trying to follow this as a guide, just make sure you're here and not over on the token, because you'll get a little bit confused. So you can click the token tracker in the bottom right there, or just above the ad, to go to the token tracker page, but you really want to be on the contract page to actually perform any functions. So that's the first thing to keep in mind, and just for anyone who's trying to follow along. Yeah. And then you have the ability here to run different functions to either read information in the contract already or to write information to the contract. So you could go and see right now the number of people that have claimed, the claimed amount of weight. You could actually go and see if you've checked your own address before, if you're not sure, on function 6 there on the read. So yeah, exactly. So you can go and perform all of these functions, and you can see general information about the contract and the ecosystem. And then if you actually want to perform functions, you would go over to the write contract area, and you could check your eligibility, and then you could decide either to mint all your weight at once, or you could mint one at a time.
Gotcha. And I don't have MetaMask connected, but obviously you would connect.
Yeah, you would connect your MetaMask here. Remember, you're not connecting to a dApp. So something to keep in mind when you're doing blockchain projects generally, I know you know this, Max, but for anyone watching, you don't have to interact with dApps if you don't want to. They obviously make things easier, right? They provide interfaces that are intuitive, hopefully, and that don't break, hopefully, and that are viewable on mobile and work with multiple wallets. You know, that's the hope for any.
Smart contracts were invented to get rid of middlemen.
Exactly, but you can do all the same stuff on Etherscan, and hopefully, well, certainly on PulseScan as well when PulseChain launches. So it's worth knowing how to do these things. But you still do need to connect your wallet. You still do need to pay gas fees, but knowing how these things work can be very useful.
Actually, that's probably, again, the dApps and the websites, the host them and stuff, those are created to make it easier, give you a nice slick UI to, attract people, things like that. But also, there are attacks where if you go to the wrong website and, you start approving transactions for something that says it's the contract, but it's actually another contract, you went to the wrong website, all that stuff. You need to really check the addresses of the one with the contract on Etherscan, and also, compare that to the one of the token that is legit. And that's one thing you can get around the whole going to the wrong website, getting into a lot of this mess, is to manually claim on Etherscan by connecting your wallet and just calling the functions.
Yeah, exactly. It's important to know when you get a security audit as a developer of a smart contract that the audit is performed on the contract itself. It's not performed on a dApp. You can't actually get a security audit on a dApp because dApps are subject to change. The reason that a security firm like SolidProof, for example, will do an audit on your smart contract is because it's immutable. But they won't come and give you a security certificate saying that your dApp is okay, because you could change half a dozen lines of code in your dApp right after they've done the audit, and they would be providing a security audit for something that has been manipulated thereafter.
So that's for, just to be clear too, you can't get a security audit from a smart contract auditing firm for a website or a portal or a dApp, because the code can change. However, you can get a pen test, traditional security, we call it penetration test, where people actually affirm, you can give your code to them. They'll try to hack the website. They'll try to hack the service, the cloud provider, whatever, in order to see if there's bugs. And, then they can, we found these bugs, you fix them. But yeah, once you start adding more features, maybe you need another test. You need another firm to come in who doesn't do smart contract, who does, traditional type of test for websites. So there's a different route to get security for that. But yeah, that you wouldn't go through a smart contract auditor for it.
No, exactly.
So how would you, what are the steps here to claim? Like, can I, I'm not connected to a wallet, but like what functions would we use to claim weight?
Yeah, it's going to be a little tricky to go through all of them without the being connected to the Web3 wallet. But some of these things are just things that you include in a smart contract generally. So, for example, the burn functions that are in there really only exist to allow you to burn a coin or an ERC20 if you want to. We don't have a burn function in our dApp, and there isn't really a reason for anybody to burn the token, but it's something that's included in smart contracts generally. And so when you see this, it's usually not contract specific. It's just a general thing.
Probably from OpenZeppelin, probably. That's the framework used that does a bunch of the must-have functions and all the default boilerplate type stuff.
Yeah, exactly. So the first one you would do on the weight contract would be check database, number 5.
Okay.
Yep. And you could put in if you're connected to your Web3 wallet here, you would put in your address, and then you would write to the contract, and it will pop up with an Etherscan link. It'll cost you, I think, 0.002 ETH to check database.
Okay.
Yep.
Cool.
And then it will return a value to you. The reason the check database function takes a little bit longer than anything else is because it is talking to that off-chain data. So it's not going to return a value to you in 2 or 3 seconds. It's going to have to go to the Chainlink node, retrieve your address, establish your eligibility, and then add you to the contract. And this is one of the reasons why dApps can be more useful to people, is because on a dApp, you can display a spinner, or you can display we're checking the database message or something. You don't really get that on Etherscan. You can't see what's happening in the background. And so if you're a person who's going to do this, just keep in mind that this data call has to go off chain and come back. So don't go, running multiple transactions for the check database function, because you're just going to waste your ETH. You need to really give it 30 seconds to a minute so that data call can come back.
That's a great point. Yeah.
Yeah. So you would write this. It would return your eligibility into the contract, and then if you went over to the read contract function, you would be able to see your eligibility before you do anything else. Under has checked, number 8.
Under has checked. Okay, gotcha.
And that would return true or false if you have checked, and then it would return 10 on line 10 whether you're in the database. And then you could see in database would tell you which one of those projects you're in. We have a list of them on the website, so you can check those out. They're in the contract as well. If you go to read the contract, they're actually in order. So, for example, the one on the far left there, the first Boolean, would be the 0 number in the contract, which would return Pulse. The second would be the number 1, which would return PulseX, and so on and so forth. I think the 8th of them is internet money.
Gotcha.
Yep.
Gotcha. Okay.
Yep. And then similar functions just below that for the unclaimed mintable weight. Remember, these are all just read functions. These just allow you to be able to know how much you're entitled to, which sacrifices you are deemed eligible for, etc. None of these things on the read contract side will actually mint the token for you. To do that, you still need to return to the write contract functions.
Gotcha. So to mint, how do we mint once we check our availability?
Yeah, so you have the choice here. You can mint weight, or you can mint all weight. Mint weight line 13 would give you the ability to mint weight from a specific project. So remember those number naming conventions we were talking about on the read side. Here you would come and you would put in the integer of the sacrifice that you were eligible for, and then you would write. So if you put in 0, you would know that you were eligible for Pulse, and then you would write in this case, and it would mint your eligible Pulse for you. Sorry, it would mint your eligible weight for you based on the Pulse sacrifice.
Right.
Similarly, on line 11 or function 11 there, if you wanted to just mint all of your weight at the one time, you could run that function here. And, if anyone is curious, this is actually where the manager would write the functions to, on line 10, mint all unclaimed weight and distribute the midnight bonus on line 9 or function 9.
Midnight bonus. Gotcha. So we checked the eligibility. We'd mint, let's say we just do mint all weight. And then would we be able to choose whether to mint the midnight bonus after that?
Not at this time. You would have to wait for PulseChain to launch, and
have to wait.
Obviously,
exactly.
You'd have to wait, and you would have to. I would recommend coming to one of our verified distribution channels, making sure that you're in the right place when you go to do this, because you might have done this the first time around, and someone could have deployed malicious code or have socially engineered you in some way. So you want to be very, very careful that when you come back to mint your midnight bonus, you're minting it from our contract and not from somebody else's. Because if you've done this once, you tend to establish that, okay, I know how to do this. But if you've only done it once and you're not used to checking, then you could be socially engineered such that someone would direct you to a fraudulent contract. So don't think that just because you've done it once that you can be like, I know how to do this and not check and not be diligent. You still need to be very diligent.
So basically saying bookmark this video and come back and watch it several times.
Yeah, exactly. And maybe we can do another one right after launch and put some links in the description so people go to the right place, because we certainly don't want anyone to be messing around with their sacrifice addresses and their sacrifice wallets. Those things should be considered your most valuable asset for a lot of people. And we don't want anybody to get in a situation where they've compromised those wallets. It's essential that you learn how to do this and do this safely.
Yep, for sure. Okay.
Or don't claim your weight and let it go to the timekeeper and everybody else.
It's an option. Yeah, definitely is. Is that it then? That's all we got to do to claim it from Etherscan?
Exactly. Yep, that's all.
And then so it'll show up, weight will show up in the Ethereum wallet, and then it'll be copied over PulseChain. We'll see the same thing.
Yeah, it won't actually show up automatically in your Ethereum wallet. You would have to go and add the weight contract as an asset in your Ethereum wallet first. Now, again, you want to be very careful when you do this that you're not adding another contract. So you would copy the contract address, go to your MetaMask, add a custom token, paste the address in. I think if you do that manually, what you'll find is that the weight icon, the logo, won't actually be imported. I think in order for it to be imported, you would have to do this through our dApp where the icon is. So that's a little bit unfortunate. That's another reason why you might want to use a dApp. It's also a reason why we would need to go and update the tracker information here, because that would allow it to happen. So the fact that the logo is not imported, excuse me, does not indicate that it's the wrong contract. It just means
Right,
that the
didn't
logo
slip.
is not there. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. Cool. Well, there you go. That's how you mint weight manually through the contract. We went through the code. I didn't see anything that stuck out crazy to me. I'm not a Solidity developer. I've definitely written a lot of code before, but I'm actually learning some of the smart contract stuff myself as far as that goes. But yeah, I think a lot of people have claimed, and yeah, I don't see any craziness from what I can see here, and
Yeah,
pretty easy to use.
we've had about 11,000 contract interactions in 14, 15 days. So it's gone pretty well. I think there's just over 1,900 holders right now, which is interesting because, most people who are claiming are actually claiming to sell. So it's interesting that anyone would claim to hold and sort of lock in those shares. So, one of those things that emerges where it's a dynamic that you're not expecting.
You want to talk about what are the strategies with weight, with selling immediately, with holding it? Like, why would you do one or the other? Like, what do you think people are going through their mind when they make these different choices?
I think like we were talking about before we started streaming, that there's different use cases for different people. Some people really need a couple of extra dollars. Some people are happy to lock in shares early because they don't want to mess with the game theory of playing chicken with a billionaire. And so it really depends on the use case for the individual. There is certainly an advantage if you can time the launch of PulseChain very accurately. Then you could certainly obtain a large or an outsized share of the circulating supply of weight. Something to keep in mind with weight also is that it's distributed per address, not per or not ranked by sacrifice amount. So weight actually gives people who were very, very small sacrifices relative to the total the chance to be weight whales as opposed to pulse whales, for example.
Interesting. That's an interesting part of it, like the distribution model too. Do you want to talk about that a little bit?
Yeah, sure. So we had a few different decisions to make with respect to weight and the time restriction that we were on, or we felt like we were on. We started building not knowing if we were going to finish before PulseChain launched because there was a lot of speculation that Pulse would be live in May. So we were building under that environment and just wanted to sort of get it out with a minimal feature set so that it was live and the game theory could start. But we chose to give this to Ethereum people initially. And this is actually one of the things that one of the reasons for using the Chainlink tech stack was that we knew that we wanted to potentially add additional sacrifices. And so as a result of that, it meant that we had to go with the Chainlink model as opposed to the Merkle tree. And we wanted to add in other people. So we added in BSC addresses as well. So if you're in one of the BSC sacrifices for these groups, you should be able to claim weight as well. I should mention, though, that a few people have made this mistake. The fact that you are eligible for weight because of your BSC sacrifice does not mean that you can mint weight on BSC. The weight contract is only deployed on Ethereum. And so if you are a BSC sacrificer and you're trying to mint weight on BSC, you will be unable to. So a lot of people who are having issues with our dApp, it's because they're actually assuming that a BSC sacrifice means that they can mint on BSC. And unfortunately, that's not the case.
It's a good thing to bring up. Yeah. What can you tell us about Tide?
Yeah, so the Coast website, zeroxcoast.com, has another project on it that we are wanting to talk about, but we can't, unfortunately, release too much information about it or make forward-looking statements. Again, we were talking before stream a little bit about the securities implications of making forward-looking statements in this industry, especially when you have major pieces of legislation that are pending that could change how the industry is regulated. You need to be very careful. And so while we are certainly less risk averse than our attorneys, we have to be governed by what our attorneys tell us. And securities attorneys are risk averse generally. So look, we will probably at some point seek a letter from the SEC, which will be like a no enforcement letter, where you would sort of go through a process with them of explaining what your product or service does. And then they return to you what would be termed a no action letter. And a no action letter would give you some confidence that you could move forward with the process you described, the product that you're describing, and not have future litigation directed at you or enforcement leveled at you. So that's something that if you're a developer of a blockchain product in the United States, especially, you might want to consider, because relatively speaking to, in terms of the cost, receiving a no action letter is relatively inexpensive compared to some of the other avenues you could go down, and certainly less expensive than the SEC kicking in your door and stopping your operations. So
how easy? I mean, is it kind of one of the guaranteed things where if you send them a letter, they'll send you one back? It's not like, I send you one easy, send me two back.
It's not quite like that. You have to have it drafted by an attorney, a securities attorney who applies it to them. You have to go into pretty in-depth detail about your operation and how your product works. And you have to pass tests that are like-kind tests, where you might describe in your white paper, for example, that your product is designed to appreciate. But if your product actually, delivers interest to shareholders, for example, then you might fail a like-kind test, and they could deem it to be like a time deposit, for example. So you have to be very careful with securities law that even though you're describing your product one way, if you're describing it in such a way that if the product actually does something that is similar to an existing product, then you could be subject to a securities violation. So I know that's a lot of legalese, but we're very, very deep into this, and as a result, we can't say too much about Tide. What I can say, however, sorry.
Oh yeah, go ahead.
So what I can say, however, is it's a project we've been working on for 6 months. It's a project that builds a layer of features on top of existing assets that everybody has heard of and that they like. And it is actually only step 1 of 3 in creating that additional feature set. We can't build it all into one asset or one token. So Tide will be one of a series of products that we'll be releasing over the next 6 to 9 to 10 months that will add functionality to the ecosystem and create repeatability. And we're very, very excited about it. So it'll hopefully be out relatively soon. We took the decision very recently that instead of releasing it on Ethereum, it probably makes the most sense for us to wait for PulseChain to be live for us to release, because there are some dependencies in the contract that would make more sense if they were on or if they were utilizing PulseX as opposed to Uniswap. So we don't want to be hamstrung by the fork in that case. So we will be releasing the code on testnet v2b with our dApp. That'll be happening in the next month, 6 weeks, 8 weeks, something like that. So everybody will get a chance to play with Tide, hopefully before PulseChain launches. And then we will launch it on PulseChain, and then we will come back and actually release it on Ethereum as well. And we'll link it up to Uniswap, probably V3, although it'll be linked to PulseX on PulseChain.
So is that the reason to get weight right now? Is because is that what you would say would be the best benefit in participating in weight now is it can be used, maybe it's interacts with Tide somehow, maybe it gets you on that list of the other tokens in the ecosystem. Is that something that it's why people would participate
in weight? Why they would participate in weight?
Like why would they claim weight and all that?
So I can say this definitively. We did not set out to build Tide with weight in mind at all. And so we got very, very far along on the Tide contract. In fact, we've deployed several versions on V2B testnet, and we've been playing with our own demo dApp with a group of maybe 55 or 60 testers who are aware of it and have been interacting with it. So we're a long way down the line with Tide, and we did not intend at any point to incorporate weight into Tide. However, we have seen, big reaction from the community and a lot of people asking about the future utility for weight. And, there is certainly a group of people out there that will be established by claiming weight and participating in our first release that could potentially see some sort of benefit in the future. That's all I can really say.
The wait OGs may have some future benefits. No wait expectations. Wait expectations.
Sure.
No wait expectations. Okay. Very interesting. Yeah, it's again, coming into this, I'm always with new projects and stuff. I want to ask good questions. I want to be optimistically skeptical in a lot of ways. So I'm trying to hit you on a few different angles. But yeah, so far.
So in line with what you're talking about, like we've seen very recently that the products that are in the ecosystem already that people know. I mean, you don't have to go very far to find examples of a Hedron that is, going to create staking functions with Icosa in the future. And if you had have claimed your Hedron initially, you probably didn't know that was going to happen at some point. And it was responsibly disclosed that, hey, we're working on this thing, but it wasn't something that you knew initially. And, something similar is happening with Pulse Doge, and something similar is happening with Maxi and Team. So there are definitely people who see that, hey, in the short term, I need to release a product that has product market fit and that is going to be useful for people. And then the next task becomes, okay, how do I create value for those people with an additional product and make sure that they're taken care of or receive some sort of advantage in the new feature set? Because obviously, like dealing with smart contracts, when you want to introduce new features, you need new contracts. So,
yeah, very cool. Yeah, that's something too, just to hit on the securities talk. For new crypto projects, what advice would you have as far as how to approach, doing it right as far as securities, not getting yourself declared as security, for example, to not run into, we were talking about earlier about red flag type stuff for different places. What would you say is a good approach to take for crypto projects to make sure you don't get into trouble, and make sure everything's kosher with everything going on out there?
Yeah, sure. So it really depends on the jurisdiction that you're operating in and the jurisdiction that your users are operating in. Just because you're based in Indonesia, say, doesn't mean that your product can't potentially defraud or damage a person in the United States, and you could have American regulators go after you. So you're not necessarily safe because you are physically located in a place that's geographically distributed from the US if you have American users, right? And this is the case with every jurisdiction. So, you really need to know the securities law of the places where your users are going to be. And we're an American-based company, and we are going to great lengths to engage securities attorneys in the early stages of this. And we had a good 2-hour meeting with our securities lawyers today, explaining the things that we're building, explaining how they relate to existing tools so that there could be precedent for, some sort of potential litigation in the future, right? Our securities attorneys, in order to give us good advice, need to understand existing products in the marketplace very, very well. And so these people are hard to find. So we were explaining today to our attorneys how HEX worked and the fact that it's a smart contract, and had to get through these barriers where we're explaining new concepts to them that are Web3 concepts, right? Because even though they're securities attorneys who have worked with the SEC or fought cases with the SEC in the past, that doesn't mean they necessarily know how modern Web3 tools are built. So the first thing I would say is get a securities attorney and make sure they understand existing products that are in the marketplace, so that if you were ever to be the subject of an investigation, they could reference existing products and why you're like them. And if they haven't taken action against those previous products, well, you would have a very good case to say, hey, we're replicating a feature set, or we're building with the same ethos, and we really want you to have a look at these projects because you haven't deemed any enforcement needed to come down upon them. And the second thing I would say is, if you have a good securities attorney, or you can get one in the US, try and get that no action letter. Go and be upfront with securities regulators, because they're so used to chasing people that when you go and be upfront with them and tell them what you're doing, you might find that their feedback is you need to tweak a couple of things in order to not be a security. And now that doesn't necessarily mean you're not subject to the rules and restrictions or regulations of another agency. It just means that, hey, okay, you're not a security, and we're likely not going to take action against you as long as you build the product that you say you're going to build. But you still have to go outside and make sure that you have money transmitter licenses in each state if you're going to sell an asset, or that you need to be registered with FINRA and supplying reports on potentially money laundering activity and things like this. There are multiple layers that you need to go through, and just being not a security does not necessarily mean that you're safe. So you have to be very, very diligent, and a securities attorney should be able to help you with that.
Yeah, I think there's a lot of projects that come out all the time, and they do different kinds of stack phases. And, I think definitely there's people who put more diligence, more time and energy into that aspect of than others. And, we never want to see anyone get tripped up, especially when you're working on a good project. So, it sounds like you all definitely are putting a lot of resources into making sure you've dotted all your T's and crossed all your I's. And I said that backwards on purpose, by the way. Just to see if people are listening. Everyone's like, what did you even say in the first place? To make sure that everything's going well. So, I think getting that firsthand experience and people knowing, what to look out for and these things, how important they are. You hear other people talk about it, if it's more important on it than if you just are Googling like, oh, what should I do about new crypto projects? So.
Yeah, and hopefully in the future for other projects that are coming along that want to build novel feature sets and help the industry or help the small, albeit small now, PulseChain community, hopefully we can help with some of those things. We're not in a position to yet, but we're talking about precedent, right? So if we can set precedent that our tools are built in such a way that they're trustless and that no action letters have been given to us, maybe that allows us to help others in the future. So if you have questions about things like that, if you have questions about things like that and you want to operate in the US or have US users, it'd be worth getting in touch with us, because we may be able to direct you to some resources that could be helpful.
Nice. What is your favorite thing about Wait? Like the thing that just blows your mind, if in that direction, like what do you like best about the project?
I like that there have been people who did not plan well financially for these sacrifices that have been able to get some level of financial freedom from them or from the release. It was built with that intention, and it was built to give people a little bit of breathing room if they needed it. And I'm very, very satisfied that we've all received messages from people, and some of them have been nasty and some of them have been great. And the great ones really, keep you going. So, that person who tweeted out that she had been able to go see her parents as a result of her weight claim, we were sitting around a conference table at the time and got that message, and we were all just like, okay, cool. We can work harder for these next few hours, right? We can stay up late on these days. And sometimes you can get a little bit lost and a little bit frustrated when you work so hard to give something away to people for free. But that sort of stuff really does keep you going through it all. So we really appreciate those messages, and we hope that we're delivering something of value.
Very cool. Yeah, I think there's so many new projects that their Twitter's just filled with scam, rug pull, blah blah blah, and there's nothing wrong with being skeptical of new projects. That's what you should all do that, but you shouldn't just I would recommend just going into a chat and just start screaming at people to prove you're not a scam. Like, it's on the accountability is on the user to say, okay, let me look at the code. Let me go watch people who have looked at the code. Let me go, look at the audits myself if they had them and stuff like that. And really be, mindful of, there's a lot of people putting a lot of time, energy, blood, sweat, and tears into making these projects. And a lot of it is free money, if nothing else. So just would tell people to be mindful of stuff like that. There's a lot of people out there with good intentions that are doing nice things for other people through their hard work on these projects, and hopefully they'll be rewarded for that stuff as well. I want to ask you, because we have to talk about HEX PulseChain before we get off here. On a 2 to 5 year time horizon, which are you more bullish on, HEX or PulseChain?
We organize sacrifice pools for both. I think one of the things that I learned in the HEX release using the adoption amplifier was that, it's great to be an early buyer of coins, but if you can really understand launch mechanics, that's where the real money is made. And so that's why we started those pools as soon as we realized, hey, this is where you get this multiplier. Actually, in fact, what I would say is that the real advantage in the Pulse and PulseX launches was that if you got people together in advance and were able to take money from the real world and put it into crypto early, not only did you get a multiplier advantage by having more people in, but you also got a run up in the price of HEX if you were early enough to start formulating these pools, if you were taking people from Fiat into HEX. So that's where we really benefited. So we had similar size pools for each for Pulse and PulseX, although my personal stake in PulseX is probably 10x what it is in Pulse. And I think in the short term, you're going to see a lot of sell pressure from PulseX to Pulse.
Just want to ask that too. So the 10x, was that because you had more confidence in PulseX, or was it other factors?
So it's based on time horizons. I think PulseX, the deflationary aspect of it with the fee or the buy and burn function, I think that's going to be really, really powerful in a 2 to 5 year time horizon. And I'm able to withstand personally the impact of the probably relatively poor performance of PulseX relative to Pulse in the first 6 to 24 months of the project launches. So I would imagine you'll see Pulse trading at trading above PulseX for that period of time. But then I think the buy and burn function will really kick in. And we've looked at the code for that pretty closely because we're building projects to interface with the PulseX exchange. And so having really dug into it and having seen the power of that buy and burn, I really think that there's a lot of value to that PulseX on that 2 year post-launch time horizon.
Interesting. Okay. So yeah, sorry to cut you off on there for a second, but yeah, you want to finish HEX versus PulseChain next few years?
I have said for a long time that I think the real advantage in HEX will be on the EHEX side, because I think you'll see a lot of people bridging and taking their EHEX and maybe even selling and moving it over to PHEX or HEX. So I think that there's a potential advantage for people who stay in the EHEX side and try and buy up some of that supply and stake long term, especially when you consider the abundance of fiat on and off ramps that are available to you and the different exchange options. And also, the potential to, maybe sell one of those things and just use like a liquidity to take a loan against it and then withdraw to a fiat bank account. I think there's some potential over there. So I'm not going to be one of the people who's racing over to PHEX. I think HEX on Ethereum still is going to have a lot of value.
So a lot of people probably look at it like, oh, how could you even compare HEX versus PulseChain if you're starting now? HEX is already, even now, it's at 3 or 4 cents. And, it's not near a launch phase price like PulseChain. We expect PulseChain. We suspect PulseChain may be. But the interesting thing here is at PHEX and whether it dumps or not. And does PHEX dump down to sub-penny, near, not quite, HEX launch prices? I wouldn't say that, but what if it goes super low and you do kind of get that, throwback HEX, which could be more comparable to a PulseChain launch price. What do you think is going to happen there? Any ideas?
I think the lack of a fiat on-ramp at the launch of Pulse is going to mean that it's going to be difficult to get economic energy into the system. And so I would love to see the building of fiat on-ramps dedicated to PulseChain. There are some issues with custody specifically. If anyone's curious as to why people aren't building this, custody of assets in stablecoins is the number one reason, because the big players in the custody space don't support Richard Heart projects unless you beg them to. So think of Fireblocks, for example, as the number one custodian that is mostly resold by every other supplier. They didn't support HEX until we actually went and asked them about it maybe 9 months ago. And they're not planning to support PulseChain natively either, even though it's an EVM chain. So I think the lack of ability to get economic energy into Pulse at launch is going to be a little bit of a struggle. And I know that there are bridges out there, and I know that people have tools to get economic energy over there. But I think all of those things are friction points. And so, I think that HEX on ETH still has that value, and that's the reasoning, or that's the rationale that I have for it.
Gotcha. Very cool. Predictions for HEX if PulseChain launches this year, PulseX. What do you think price we're going to be looking at prices wise by the end of the year?
Look, obviously this isn't financial advice. Do your own research.
If you need a moment to go get your crystal ball, go ahead. Just go get it.
Look, I'd be stunned if HEX closed the year below where it is currently. I know that we are subject to market trends and broader things that are happening, but it's been a pretty significant drop for the best part of 12 months now. It depends where you want to take the high from. It's not a long history of a chart, but if you chart it against some other assets in the space, we're probably due for a little bit of a run up. There is the potential for it to go lower because of the Richard Hart law or Hart's law, where assets move based on the liquidity that they're paired to. But luckily, we're seeing over time a little bit of the liquidity that connects HEX to Ethereum dry up and more of it go towards stablecoins. So that tends to suggest that you would be able to get a run up in HEX a little bit more easily if it's depegged from those other major assets. So, I'd be stunned if we didn't finish the year in HEX up from where we are now.
Yeah, it's going to be an interesting year for sure. I agree with a lot of that. Yeah, it's macro trends are interesting. How long do we, it's probably not going to be a hockey stick, I wouldn't suspect. Said this at the Pulse conference the other day, talking to some folks on the panel. I'm like, I don't think it's going to be hockey stick. A lot of people are saying, they think as soon as the bear market ends, okay, bull market. It's not, a lot of times there's a lot of sideways in between on that. So wouldn't get my hopes up as far as that goes. But
exactly, there's big assets in the space that have had 2-year and 3-year sideways, right? And one of those things that if you've watched any Richard Hart streams for any period of time, you know that you have to be in the asset for a week out of every bull market in order to realize all of the major gains in it. About 50% of the gains happen in a 7-day period over that bull run. So there's a lot of sideways, and you have to be able to hold, and you have to have the aptitude for it, and you need to be able to recognize that your asset's going to decline by 90% at some point, and then you're going to be in the I don't know what to do phase for 18 months or 2 years, and I think that's probably where a lot of us are right now.
Well, I would say the do nothing phase, or don't do anything that jeopardizes your wealth. If y'all haven't, I imagine a lot of you haven't read The Intelligent Investor by Benjamin Graham. Sorry for making the assumption, but I haven't read it until the last few years or so. But the audiobook version, if anyone's interested in listening to audiobooks, has a commentary on each chapter, which is really interesting. It gives you like a modern perspective too. And I think Warren Buffett recommends chapters 8 and 20. Chapter 8 is Mr. Market, and chapter 20, I forget what it is. But if you're interested in like the market mindset and understanding like really the fundamentals about all of this stuff, those two books, or that book and those 2 chapters, super relevant today. And the commentary basically talks about what you said, like a lot of the same key concepts of having to wait through market cycles, not having to not making actions, or not making not listening to Mr. Market because he's like this schizophrenic type of buy sell, get panics, all this stuff. So that's a good book if anyone's interested in fundamentals of investing, which are literally so applicable to today and to the crypto market. Even though it's an old book, it's timeless in that way. Man, it's been a pleasure. It's been a great interview. I'm glad we went through the code. Got to talk about get a little bit of HEX and PulseChain in there too. But Wait project, very interesting. I know much more about it than I knew before. And it's glad that you were able to come on and answer some questions. And here's the first question we've got from the audience. If you have a SAC for PulseX and you don't claim weight immediately, do you accumulate 1 weight per hour until you do claim it?
Yeah, correct. There is inflation paid in weight from the time that your sacrifice that you were in ended. So as of today, you've actually been accumulating weight this whole time and you didn't know it, which is nice. And for every hour that you continue to wait, each address that is eligible will receive 1 extra weight that they can claim when they choose to. So each address is accumulating 1 weight per project per hour.
So so is there any game theory behind this, or should you just always wait until the project's about to launch before you commit your weight?
Yeah, I mean, if you think you can time the launch of PulseChain accurately, there is obviously a benefit to you being as close to the launch as possible. But if you fail to claim before the manager function is run and minting is turned off, then all of the weight for all of the projects that you could have minted will be distributed to those that did and to the timekeeper via the midnight bonus. So you want to get it right, and you want to lock in your shares and your weight at some point, and you probably don't want to let them go to anybody else. But yeah, it's the same function that everyone was running on HEX. Really, yeah.
Very interesting. Yeah, you mentioned that earlier about you wouldn't. So once it's announced, So I guess once PulseChain, for example, is announced, but hasn't launched yet. But once it's announced, that you think that a lot of people who have been waiting to claim their weight, there'll be like a big bull rush to claim their weight at that point to get the
I think there'll be a
bonus.
Exactly. I think there'll be a rush, and we've planned for that. So we've got backups for dApps and backups for Chainlink nodes and things like that. So we're planning for that eventuality. But it's just as likely that Richard comes on stream and says, "Hey, the first block's already been mined, and you can go do it right now." I think that's probably unlikely now that I've considered what has to be done with respect to the validators and the work that they have to do to secure the chain. So I think it's unlikely that he does that, but it still could happen.
Yeah, for sure. Stoke, again, it's been great, man. You'll tell everybody where they can find Wait. Follow you on follow the Coast on Twitter, 0x at 0x Coast, I believe. What else do you want to tell the people?
Yeah, thanks, Max. So 0x Coast is the website and the Twitter. Coast 0x is the Telegram group. I would suggest probably just go to the Twitter or the website first and find Telegram through there so that you're not going to a fraudulent group. We've talked a lot about OPSEC today, and it's good to be mindful of those things. So I would follow one of those channels to get there. And then I would just tell everybody, there's a lot of people spending a lot of time in a bear market here trying to build tools that they can't release until PulseChain launches, and they would love to be able to, but they're sitting on code and they've put time and effort and money and opportunity cost into these projects that they really care about. So if you can, get out there and support them, support all of them. We are feature set agnostic at Coast, right? We are trying to support the people who are behind the sacrifices here. We don't care if there are overlapping feature sets. We know that there are. We're interested in the people who are going to participate in the ecosystem, and we want to get more of them. So encourage other projects to come over to Pulse, ask what they need in order to bring their user base, because we've done outreach ourselves and we've tried hard to get them over, and it's really, really tough. You can convert one person, right? You can do an onboard and you can have one person buy HEX, and it's awesome that you do. Please keep doing it. But you can also go and find a project founder who was on Luna, who had Terra blow up on them and has 15,000 users and needs a new home. Like, let's go get that person too. And if their feature set overlaps slightly with, Mintra or Fiat or, one of our projects, hey, cool. We got 15,000 more people on our ecosystem.
It's a great point. Yeah. Keep doing the outbound messaging and marketing, and send some postcards or donate to people who do, and get onboard some devs. Yeah. There's no such thing as too many devs. No such thing. It's devs only make good things happen.
You've got VC funds out there at the moment saying that they're spending $300 million on Web3. Well, let's get some of that for PulseChain.
Yeah, let's get. Can you imagine if we get some Sequoia funded dev team to come over to PulseChain and talk about institutional. Institutional is in. They're in PulseChain.
They're going to build the next set of tools. Institutional is going to build all of the things, and they've got experience from running social networks, and they've got experience from like high-level analytics firms, and so they have a lot of knowledge that they're going to bring over to the Web3 space, and we need to be prepared to compete with those tools. And so we need to get people who are good. We need to fund them. And if you have a project that you think is useful and you want to build it, and you don't have the legal help, or you don't have the organization, right? Like, we're here. We've got, we don't have all the capacity in the world, but we've got some, and we'll share. So, come talk to us, because we're happy to help.
Awesome. That is, you can find Coast Crew on Telegram, on Twitter, 0xweight.com and 0xtide.com, I believe. Is that right?
Yeah, 0x Coast, 0x Weight, 0xtide.com. There's not a lot at the Tide website yet, but the Tide's coming in.
The Tide. Oh God, you did it, didn't you? So many puns. Tide is coming. And like I said, people watching, sub if you haven't. Always appreciate getting those numbers up. The algos prefer numbers too. That's kind of how they speak to each other and make things more broadly available and not. Follow me at RHMax on Twitter if you want to see my tweets. And appreciate everyone coming. I'm gonna clip this up, especially the code review. That was very useful. I think a lot of people will find that good. And that's been a great conversation, man. I really appreciate you coming on. It's been the evening with us.
Yeah, thanks, Max. Let's do it again, hey?
Yeah, sounds good. Take care, and everyone, we're out.